Wasatch Report, shooting straight on everything from prepping to politics.
Welcome, everybody, to the Wasatch Report. I'm Suzanne Sherman. I'll be your host for the next hour here on the Cerberus Radio Network, where we defend liberty and freedom from the flames of tyranny. Today is Tuesday, March 19th, year of our Lord 2019. Jeff, we're edging ever so painfully, slowly closer to spring, but I'm still covered in ice out here, hoping for a meltdown. That's our weather report. You can follow us on Facebook.com/Cerberus Radio Network. If you go to our fan page, CRN, and our Facebook page, you can see we have a link, and that will hit Radio Co., and you can listen to our 24/7 broadcasting. We have archived shows. What we have is always relevant. We don't chase the headlines of the day and try and keep up with the dog and pony show in Washington, D.C. The stuff we talk about these shows, even if it's a month or two old, you will find it is still relevant. We talk about principles, not just personalities in politics. You know, when Jeff, you and Daniel started this network, you had a tagline, 18th century ideas for 21st century thinkers. And that is still really relevant. And the lens through which we examine today's topics do harken back to the proper role of government and our founding principles. So we hope that you enjoy the way we lay this out for you. We try to keep our content interesting and not say the same thing all the time, and try to differentiate ourselves from the mainstream media outlets. Again, I tell you, go to Fox and Patriot Channel, all those, and hear the same thing all day long. We try to be a little bit different. We've been talking about Venezuela a lot. We have very blessed to have our good friend Sandra Kinsel joining us, not today, but he's a frequent contributor, welcoming him to the network the other day, about Venezuela. He was there. He has many contacts. We've been talking behind the scenes about more information he's going to share. You know, the typical scenario we're hearing right now when we're trying to fight socialism in this continental landmass here in our political system, we use Venezuela. Well, you know what happened? Look what happened. They voted themselves into it. And you have to shoot your way out of it. Well, did they really? What influence did we play in Venezuela? We have a lot more to share with you. So if that topic interests you, we will be posting some announcements when we're getting more into that. I know Greg Carpenter, also known as Junk Bond, will be discussing that with him. But I did come across an article because people can say, why are we even interested in Venezuela? And I submit to you, I think Venezuela is going to be our new version of the Middle East. We've already been messing around and they're interfering with their sovereignty, just as we have been in the Middle East. And last week, there's an article here, LouRockwell.com shared this, and this is written by Dr. Ron Paul, and he's asking, is Trump really about to attack Venezuela? Because last week, starting with this article, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo ordered the last of the United States diplomats out of Venezuela, saying their presence was a constraint on U.S. policy toward the country. The wording seemed intended to convey the idea that the United States is about to launch military action to place a Washington-backed, self-appointed politician to the presidency. Was it just bluster designed to intimidate, or is this administration really about to invade another country that has neither attacked nor threatened the United States? While U.S. administrations engaged in regime change have generally tried to mask their real intentions, this U.S. backed coup is remarkable for how honest its backers are being. Not long ago, National Security Advisor to the President, John Bolton, boy, what a disastrous decision that was, in my opinion, openly admitted that the U.S. companies in control of Venezuelan oil was the administration's intent. Trump administration officials have gone so far as mocking the suffering of Venezuela's when a suspiciously timed nationwide power failure heightens citizens' misery. We discussed that on our show last week as well. According to media reports, Mike Pence is angry with the Venezuelan coup leader, Juan Guaido, because he promised the whole operation would be a cakewalk, just like the neocons promised about Iraq. Guaido and hundreds of thousands of protesters would follow him to the Colombian border to liberate U.S. aid trucks just over the border, but no one showed up. So Pompeo and the neocons made up a lie that the Venezuela president Nicolas Maduro's thugs burned the aid trucks to prevent the people from getting relief from their suffering. Even the pro-war New York Times finally admitted that the administration was lying. It was opposition protesters who burned the trucks. So what was behind the U.S. takedown? Or was the U.S. behind the U.S. takedown of Venezuela's power grid? Well, as Booger explained, he got in touch with somebody out there that said something did fail. Read into this what you want. Again, we've got our eye on Venezuela. I think that's going to be an area of involvement and an area where we have no business being. Any thoughts on that, Jeff Johnson, my producer and co-host? How are you this morning?
I'm doing very well, thank you. I thought it was interesting in the beginning of that article, they said something about U.S. involvement in the coup.
Mhm.
And we had that person on Twitter that was berating our junk bond about his lack of knowledge about how U.S. involvement down there. Well, it seems to be that that article has it right and is confirming that our experts here at Cerberus Radio Network are correct that we had something to do with everything that's going on down there. And again, he talked about in the article, they talk about the oil and what did I say the other day? Follow the money down there and you'll find out who's involved. And it is us with capital U and S.
And remember, if anybody missed the episode of The Spy Who Loves Liberty, Junk Bond and Booger, who could miss a show with those two? Really get into the details of our involvement in Venezuela. And again, Sander is very much involved in communication with people that are down there still. And that's going to be the premise upon which we are going to base these future shows on this topic. So it's going to be unlike the stuff you're hearing on other media outlets. So I encourage you to continue following along on this story. We've got a lot of interesting things to cover today. We're going to mix it up with a little bit of preparedness, a little constitutionalism, and have some fun with some topics. Yesterday was pretty intense, so today we're going to have a little fun. We're going to talk about some constitutional issues with regards to firearms. Beto O'Rourke had recently asked, is the Constitution out of date? We're going to get into a little bit of that, and then we're going to wrap up the show with some fun stuff here about 10 reasons why you should move to the woods and build a cabin. That sounds like a lot of fun. In fact, Jeff is involved in something like that, helping some friends of his do the very same thing in Maine, and I know that's a really fun project. Let's start out here with some gun regulations. This is actually a tab that's been open on my window for some time that I've been meaning to get to. But as we know, the Democrats have taken the House and they are going to march forward with further gun control acts. What a surprise there. New York Democrat, this is on guns.com. New York Democrat on Capitol Hill has resurrected legislation to expand the country's background check system and force gun owners to carry liability insurance. United States Representative Carolyn Maloney introduced a trio of bills this week: the Gun Show Loophole Closing Act, the NICS Review Act, and the Firearm Risk Protection Act, with the hopes that, with the Democrats back in the driver's seat of the House, 2019 could see the gun control package advanced. Well, they would have to do that with the complicity of the Senate and Donald Trump, who, as we know, already signed off on the furtherment of the extreme risk protection orders and the bump stock ban. What else did he say? First, we'll take the guns, then we'll worry about due process. He also told Senator Dianne Feinstein he would be open to hearing a debate on the banning of the AR. He should have stood up and said, absolutely no, pounded his fist on the table. This is not up for negotiation, because that's really what candidate Trump would have done. Anyway, let me get back to the article. We have a gun show bill. They love that gun show loophole. They assume that just anybody and everybody can be a felon and go and buy a gun as long as you're at a gun show. This is a bill filed. It's called HR 20, would give ATF the resources and authority it needs to ensure that gun shows do not facilitate dangerous gun sales. This is the camel sticking its nose under the tent, because as we know, the party of the Democrats considers every gun sale to be dangerous. Through the use of background checks and all gun transfers at these events, that they could make the world safer. However, a recent Justice Department survey found that the vast majority of criminals get their firearms from street sources rather than gun shows and other retail outlets. Let me ask you this: with all the spying, all the tracking, all the facial recognition software, do you really think a criminal is going to show up at a gun show when he can just get a gun off the streets from a friend, most oftentimes a stolen firearm? I think there was a recent study that said 90% of firearms used in crimes had been obtained illegally. So once again, this is a thinly veiled guise in which they can round up guns and create a new class of criminals via legislative fiat. So on the subject of background checks, the NICS bill, HR 821 would require that the FBI retain all background check data for at least 90 days. Current law, in order to prevent the trappings of federal gun registry, requires that personal information be submitted for the transfer be trashed after 24 hours. Within 24 hours after the licensed gun dealer who submitted it receives the go-ahead from NICS, and the transfer can proceed. For delayed checks, which accounted for about 2%, according to a 2016 audit, the purchaser information is kept up to 90 days while the transaction is pending. Denied transferred records are kept for 10 years. Let me ask you this, Jeff. Do you honestly think that any of this information is discarded 24 hours, 90 days after? I think they keep all of it. That's just me.
Oh, I don't believe they get rid of anything. I'm sure people are worried about a registration law. Well, I mean, you bought it. They recorded it. Somebody has a register of it. The gun shop certainly does. And you think that when you get, I mean, when you go to the gun shop, you get on a little laptop and you print all that information in, and then the gun store types in his information that he's sending off to get the approval. You sure that somehow that's not being stored out there? And yeah, all right, keep thinking. I got a bridge, or right. I got oceanfront property in Arizona I'll sell you.
Well, and this is also, remember when I was discussing my concerns with Connor Boyack in Prop 2 out here, which had to do with the legalization of medical use of marijuana. I said, look, what about ATF form? I think it's 40, I forgot what it is, 4733. I wrote an article about it. But anyway, where they say if you're using marijuana, even in a state where it's legal, you may not purchase a firearm. All of this stuff is maintained and recorded. His response, though, was, well, in Utah, guess what? You don't have to go to an FFL. You can have a private party transfer without getting the feds involved. Well, guess what the Democrats in the House want to do now also? Halt nationally, pardon my French, all private transactions, all private gun sale transfers. Why do you want to do that? Because they are outside the scope of the background checks. So if the background checks weren't a form of de facto registration, why would they care if certain states allowed private party transfers not involving the federal government? They really tip their hand in that one, is I believe. We have a gun insurance bill as well, HR 822. It would incentivize responsible gun ownership through a mandate. So we're going to try and incentivize you, but it's going to be through compulsion. There's nothing incentivizing there. There's nothing voluntary there. A mandate requiring a would-be gun owner to show proof of insurance before they could purchase a firearm. Former New York City Council member Maloney, who is the representative putting this forth, represented New York in Congress in 1993. And that time, she blocked dozens of anti-gun bills each session, including versions of all three, which were introduced this week as efforts to add millions in funding to the Centers for Disease Control, to prevention, to study gun violence as a health issue and require smart gun usage. What is a smart gun? That is a firearm that incorporates the use of technology so that only the user can operate this firearm. I've seen examples where, for instance, you have to have a certain bracelet or a certain ring, and then that will correspond with the gun, and then you can shoot it to save your life. What if there's a malfunction? What if the government decides to shut it off or censor you? We've talked about social credits. All this stuff is linked through technology. Smart gun technology. I tell people, get the guns you need and get more than you need while you still can. There's going to come a day when every single transaction will be tracked, will be monitored. We will have permanent de facto gun registration, even though the Second Amendment prohibits it. The Second Amendment is a dead letter, folks. Anybody that thinks otherwise needs to wake up. In fact, I'm going to be
continue talking about the opioid crisis, and
that was awful. We will be discussing a little bit more. Beto O'Rourke was asking if the Constitution is even relevant anymore these days. I want to share with you also an article out of, let me see if I can find it now. I have to open this one. Yes, here we have a federal judge. This is a story out of Salt Lake, so I wanted to share this. This is a local instance in Utah. Federal judge denies a Utah gun enthusiast's attempt to halt a ban on bump stocks. Going back to this bump stock ban, these extreme risk protection orders, I have told people it has never been more difficult in the history of these United States, I beg your pardon, this United State, to purchase a firearm. You can thank the Republican Party and you can thank the NRA for that one. Am I totally off base with that one, Jeff?
No. I posted just earlier this morning on a local gun rights group that, you know, the NRA is one of our biggest enemies of rights in this country. Same with pro-life groups, NRA and other gun groups that demand their constitutional rights are the biggest threat we have to our natural rights out there, as much as government.
Well, we can thank the NRA for incorporating the Second Amendment against the states, which, you know, unfortunately, a lot of people that are ignorant on this concept think is a really, really good idea. But what we're seeing is when we empower the federal judiciary with something, a topic that was never delegated, a matter never delegated to the general government, we see an overreach, and they will not let go of this power. And now we have federal gun legislation across this continental landmass. When certain states might have more freedom, we're going to see less. This is what happens when you run to the federal judiciary because you don't like California's gun laws. Well, the state of Utah is going to suffer because draconian gun laws and coming from the top down are going to be imposed on all of us. Let's look at the insurance issue as well. The NRA offers insurance for gun owners. You can insure your guns through the NRA. Do you think for a nanosecond they would keep that information private if the feds asked for it? Go ahead, Jeff.
Oh, no, I said imagine that. They want to pass a law requiring insurance, and guess who's going to have the ability to offer it to you?
Now,
You think that, that's just a coincidence. I don't believe that there's any collusion there.
No, none whatsoever. Remember when the ACA, the Affordable Care Act, aka Obamacare, was being debated? Well, AARP got behind it. AARP sells an insurance that I guess ties you over, with certain Medicare programs. However it functions, they would benefit from the passing of Obamacare because their product would become more necessary. Who's behind the passage of the ACA? AARP. They stood to make a lot of money from it. So again, follow the money, like you said, and this applies no matter what the topic is, really, when we're talking about this corrupt government. But here's a story here, and we are going to we're going to call out every single false notion in this article. This could take a little while, but here we go. This is out of the Salt Lake Tribune. I also call it the Salt Lake Spittoon. A federal judge denies a Utah gun enthusiast's attempt to halt the ban on bump stocks. Jeff, this is absolutely earth-shattering. We have a member of the federal judiciary refusing to rein in unconstitutional behavior by the federal government. Is that just mind-boggling?
Are you being facetious?
Maybe just a little.
Okay, good. I'm glad. I was starting to worry.
A federal judge denied a Utah gun rights advocate's attempt to block the recently imposed ban on bump stocks. The guy's name is Chuck Aposhian, chairman of the Utah Shooting Sports Council, argued in papers that the ban on the shooting accessory, which alters semi-automatic rifles to to fire in quick bursts like a machine gun, is unconstitutional. So far, so good. It is unconstitutional. He asked U.S. District Judge Jill Parrish to grant an injunction and press pause on the bump stock ban until his lawsuit is resolved. His attorneys wrote in court papers that he has been instructed to destroy the bump stock or give it to federal firearms officials by next Tuesday. But Parrish on Friday denied his request, finding that he did not show a substantial likelihood of success on the merits of his lawsuit. He filed a notice to appeal to the 10th Circuit Court on Monday. She did not find a substantial likelihood of success. This is the difference between what the law says and what the Constitution says. We have had some long discussions on this, most notably yesterday. We did this as well. So we have the, 1934, 1964 Firearms Act, National Firearms Acts. Well, they refer to these acts as their justification for imposing these gun control laws, any gun control, any gun regulation. Well, it's constitutional it's constitutional because of that. No, it's lawful because of that. It is unconstitutional because of Article 1, Section 8, the Second Amendment, the Ninth Amendment, the 10th Amendment. The 14th Amendment does not apply. He is right. She is wrong. Does the government care if it is wrong? Answer, no. Parrish acknowledged, getting back to the article in her ruling, that he will suffer harm by being forced to destroy or give up a bump stock that will be impossible to replace. But, she wrote, it's unlikely that he will succeed in challenging the validity of the ban. Of course he will. Of course he's going to fail.
He's going to fail for sure. You're going to the government to rule against the government. Who is the government going to rule for? Certainly not you, because they're going to protect themselves.
You only exist to fund these jackasses. Pardon my language. Parrish's ruling does not outright dismiss the lawsuit, but it means the gun enthusiasts and others like him who own bump stocks will have to give up the shooting accessory before the March 26th deadline unless he succeeds in his appeal to the 10th Circuit. This makes me want to own a bump stock.
I have noticed. I've never wanted one, but I want one now, but I can't get one.
I want a bunch of them now, and I'd probably never use one. I guess they're going to have to make us cut our thumbs off too, because you can have kind of a jury rig bump stock by hooking your thumb through your belt loop. I had a friend of mine do that here with his AK, and you know what happened? The gun jammed. Bump stocks make you safer, folks. Crap like this, skilled shooters do not want stuff like this. They recognize it's garbage, just like these 100-round, magazine drums. The likelihood of a jam is substantially greater. If I had been in Las Vegas, I would have taken comfort knowing that that idiot up in the building had a bump stock because he can't aim. The likelihood of getting hit is pretty small, and the likelihood of a jam is even more significant. In fact, that's going to keep you safer than the Keystone cops that were hanging out in the hallway because they feared for their own safety. Anyway, I totally digress. He argued in his lawsuit that the executive branch, now here's the premise upon which he is basing this lawsuit, and I hold his lawyers responsible. He argued in the lawsuit that the executive branch cannot rewrite laws as it sees fit, but he contends that's exactly what the DOJ and the Bureau of ATF and ATF, they just call it ATF, named as defendants in the lawsuit, did to establish a new regulation. Congress didn't pass this law.
Right. Actually, right. He's wrong, but he's kind of right.
Yeah, he is right. He's right for that premise, but it's so much more fundamental for the English speakers than that. Congress has no right to do this whatsoever. And just because an unelected, unconstitutional, unlawful agency put this forth doesn't mean it's outside the purview of Congress or the Second Amendment or Article 1, Section 8. Remember, Congress, all legislative power shall be vested in Congress. ATF is not Congress. Furthermore, Congress has no right to regulate firearms, period. But nobody is ever going to agree with such a fundamental, truthful, honest proposition that the general government has zero authority here. That will never win. And it's not even argued anymore, folks. We've completely surrendered this. For every one of you that said, oh, it's okay, I don't need a bump stock, I hope you're out there saying when the AR ban comes, and it is, that's okay, I don't really need an AR, because you helped pave the way. At its most basic, this is from Caleb Kruckenberg. What's with these names this morning? He's a litigation counsel for the New Civil Liberties Alliance. He says, at its most basic, this is about constitutional order and about who has lawmaking power. Well, it's about it's more basic than that, as I just said. It's not who has the power, because none of them do. What they're saying here is they are admitting that Congress has the lawful authority to pass this, but they didn't. That's why they're challenging it. He also says the Constitution was very deliberate. It said that Congress makes the laws through a bicameral process and then presents it to the president for signature. And that's how we make laws, how we bind citizens to their obligations. And this turns that whole process upside down. Folks, we shouldn't even be entertaining this process. This whole process is illegitimate. They are legitimizing the process by saying Congress has this power, and they don't. Nobody says this anymore. Why is that? President Donald Trump, going back to the article, promised in March of 2018 that he would ban them because they turn legal weapons into illegal machines. You know, I really want to like Donald Trump. I really do. But he makes it so damn hard sometimes. Let's see. To do so, his administration reclassified the accessories as machine guns, which federal law heavily restricts buying, selling, or owning. Again, they have no lawful authority to do so according to the Constitution as ratified. Now, this is the kicker. This is what people seem to forget. Even then President Barack Obama found bump stocks were not the same as machine guns and could not be regulated the same way. Congress has not prohibited the possession of bump stocks by statute, though it has considered at least 5 different bills. Again, even Obama said, no, we can't do this. If you think about it, Obama is more gun-friendly than President Trump. Do you see how ridiculous these arguments get? And again, not surprisingly, a federal court stood up for an unlawful federal regulation. This guy shouldn't have even gone there. The state of Utah should have just said, we're not going to honor this. We're going to nullify it. I was having a conversation with a very well-known constitutionalist the other night, or last night actually, about my show yesterday, where we talked about federal nullification when it came to, or state nullification of a federal law. Wyoming thumbing its nose at the Endangered Species Act because a federal judge said, no, you can't hunt grizzlies in Wyoming. They're protected. Wyoming said, we're issuing tags anyway. This individual said, so what's going to happen? Somebody's going to go out with their tag, shoot a bear, and get arrested by the feds. And I said, no, Wyoming needs to step up and arrest the feds if they attempt to do so. And the person just laughed like this was such a preposterous notion. But this is entirely in conformance with the Constitution. This is why arguing for constitutional remedies is always going to lead you to a dead end. We could have such a large audience. I could be on so many other radio stations. I get offers to join other networks, to make other appearances, but to do so, I have to say, getting back to the Constitution is the solution to our problems. And as we say here truthfully, the Constitution, we feel now, after thorough study and analysis, has set us up for this. And according to our research, some of the people behind it intended for this very thing to happen. So you can argue about getting back to the Constitution all you want, but before the ink was dry in the holy parchment, we had Washington and Hamilton march into Pennsylvania in contravention to the constitutional requirement that the governor of Pennsylvania had to give them permission or request their assistance to quell a rebellion against a federal tax. Those who were afraid of a standing army were saying, I forgot who this quote is from. It's in one of my articles. But anyway, that Alexander Hamilton would use the might of the military to awe the United States citizens to the point where they would not want to resist or obfuscate or any otherwise obstruct federal plans. What was that operation we had in the Middle East? I think it was Iraq. Shock and awe. Nothing's changed. So again, we have a federal judge denying a Utah gun enthusiast attempt to halt the ban on bump stocks. Again, just like Wyoming should say, feds, we are doing this. This is in the interest of Wyoming's citizens, our tourist industry, our business, our safety. You have no right to say that we cannot do this. If you try and shoot one of, or if you try to arrest, well, yeah, if you resist arrest, you will get shot. If you try to arrest one of these lawful hunters, we will arrest you. This is the standoff we need to have. We need this standoff when a state finally passes and signs into law that abortion is not legal there. If the feds are going to try and force a clinic to be open, they need a line of warm bodies to stand between the abortuarium and the feds to keep it open. I said to my friend last night, what are we going to do? Are the feds going to call in an airstrike because there's grizzly bear hunting in Wyoming? We need the standoff. The feds have backed off in 33 states plus Washington, D.C., nullifying federal marijuana laws. Why can't we do that for any other reason?
Suzanne, do you remember your interview with Dan Fisher? Because I think either you or I asked him this very question. What are you going to do when the feds send people in to arrest you because you are disobeying a federal court's edict that you must murder babies? And his answer was, well, I have the state police. They're going to stand between me and them, and they're going to stop them from arresting me. I mean, that's the answer is simple. It isn't difficult, but for some reason, most people can't get it through their head.
No, they really can't. Well, now I have another article here, and I sent this to you. Let me open this up in the email. I try. In the interest, see, this is why my desktop is a disaster, because I never know where I'm going because I'm so disorganized. And so here I have the article now. This is Beto O'Rourke, who is suggesting that the Constitution is no longer valid. We should ditch the Constitution. And what he said here, this was an interview with the Washington Post. He openly mulled whether the rapidly changing nature of the world meant that the founding document was out of date. Now, I'm bringing this article up. This was when he was running, I think, during a 2017. Yeah, this came out in 2019, this article. But he has said, I think when he was running for Senate also, that he really thought the Constitution was out of date. Here, a 2-hour interview. He became, let's see. He said, I'm hesitant to answer because I really feel like it deserves its due. And I don't want a sound bite of it reported, but yeah, I think that's the question of the moment. Does it still work? Referring to the Constitution. Can an empire like ours, with the military presence in over 170 countries around the globe, with trading relationships and security agreements in every continent, can it still be managed by the same principles that were set down 230 years ago? So what the article says here is this bizarre quote is sure to come up again should he decide to run for president, which we know now he is. Some analysts think he is more likely to seek a spot on the 2020 ticket as a Democratic vice presidential candidate. But again, with views like this, many conservatives still want him nowhere near the White House. Why? He's right. He's absolutely right. If the Constitution was not a dead letter, we wouldn't have what he just listed here. If the Constitution wasn't a dead letter, we wouldn't have the issues we discussed for the first half of this show. The Constitution could not be any more clear with regards to Article 1, Section 8, firearms, and the Second Amendment, but we don't even entertain that discussion anymore. We can thank Antonin Scalia, by the way, for clarifying what the Second Amendment means. He says it means that you can have a handgun in your house. Gee, thanks. Thanks a lot. Thanks for nothing. And he's hailed by the conservatives as a gun rights. This Heller was supposed to be a major victory for gun rights enthusiasts. It was a disaster for this reason. It legitimized every other aspect of federal gun control other than the right to have a handgun in your home. That's the implication. That's the result of Heller. Thank you very much. We see this all the time. Law professors, very left-leaning, justify the changes to the Constitution by saying the founders never envisioned the situations we have today. They knew changes could be made. They provided for it. They knew society would evolve. That's why we have Article 5. Every time Congress convenes, they can propose a constitutional amendment. The states, in and of themselves, they don't even have to involve Congress, can propose a constitutional amendment, a convention. 3/4 ratify it in both cases. They provided for this, folks. I've heard law professors say, Well, the people want this. Oh, do they really? And California, Proposition 8 by about 70% passed. What was Proposition 8 in California? Marriage, man, woman, one of each. Federal judge overturned the will of the people. It's just easier for Congress to pass a law or the Supreme Court to issue an opinion than going through the process of an Article 5 convention and ratification. And they always do this under the premise of some sort of an emergency, just like the national emergency. We've got over 33 of them right now in effect. And all of a sudden now the border's a national emergency. If it was such a national emergency, he should have done something about it from the get-go. It's not a national emergency. And the congressmen and the senators, by the way, that voted against the National Emergency Act are being excoriated, but constitutionally they're correct. Any thoughts on that? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to chime in on this because this morning I posted on our Cerberus page, and everyone that's listening, you can go to the Cerberus page and read the post. I'm not going to read the entire post, but I always get this question every time I post about the Constitution. I always get this response always comes up: what Constitution? Question mark. And indeed, what we do have a Constitution, and Beto's wrong. We have a Constitution, and it works. It's working precisely as Hamilton and Madison wanted it to work. When they went to Philadelphia Convention, they wanted a strong national government that was over the states, ruled the states, and could veto anything that the states did. They lost. It was voted down. So what did they do? They created the Constitution. They destroyed the federal system because we had a federal system under the Articles. They destroyed the federal system and put in a new system that eventually, through stealth, got them exactly what they wanted. And read the anti-federalists who were the Federalists. Read Madison, Mason, Henry, Clinton, Yates, and all the other anti-federalists. And they'll all tell you that this new consolidated government was going to destroy the states and destroy our liberty.
And exactly. And then
what happened? Who was right? Who lied? Who told the truth?
And to say that this is a divinely inspired document in light of the vociferous opposition at the time, and what happened right after was exactly what they said. Also, I had, when I was on the radio with Paul Jensen, he said, well, even Joseph Smith, because the LDS Church holds this document to be divine. That's their teachings. He said even Joseph Smith said the document didn't go far enough because there was no enforcement clause. Well, what they're saying now is, well, we believe it was divinely inspired, but we also do not have, we also believe that God makes mistakes. So again, and the other thing I say to that is, yeah, God recognizing his own fallibility included Article 5 in this document so that mere mortal man could improve upon his good work. It's an insane proposition. And it's one of the reasons it's so difficult to make headway with people in Utah when it comes to getting away from a flawed document that was set up for this. Again, if it had any teeth, candidates like we have who's elected, like Che Guevara, Beto, these guys could never even propose policies that are in direct contravention to the Constitution. Well, that's free speech. Of course they can. You can propose what you want, but if you want to run as a candidate, you better be willing. Let me ask you this. How in the world can you run on a platform that is in direct contravention to our founding principles, the Constitution, and then when you are elected, stand up, put your hand on the Bible, the Quran, I don't care what it is, it doesn't matter, and take an oath to whomever your higher power is to uphold and defend the very document you campaigned on violating. How do you fix this system? I am at a loss. How do you fix this? You get away from it. I had an article, the first one I wrote for the 10th Amendment Center. Good enough candidates aren't good enough. And I said, we need these candidates. Absolutely. They're not going to be perfect on all issues, but they need to uphold the Constitution. It ain't going to happen, folks. There is absolutely no way it's going to happen. We have crossed the Rubicon. We need to figure out now. We are in full damage control. I'm going to bring out some articles during the week and next week. You know, we see all the time, no, we're about to become a socialist nation. We already are. That's something people have to wrap their heads around. Donald Trump, we will never be a socialist nation. Everybody's cheering. And what do they do the next day? They put their kids on school buses and send them to the socialist public education indoctrination centers. All so they can go further on into the socialist publication indoctrination centers we call the system of higher education. Then we go, if they were sick, to our government-issued healthcare centers. Tell me we're not a socialist nation. I don't believe you. There was a really good article. This is how I save my sanity. 10 reasons to escape to the mountains. I love this stuff, Jeff. You know, I have no solutions here, but I had a personal secession. I decided it was going to be in my best interest to just get away from all this. We have, however, an assault. Let me find this other article too, 10 reasons. We have an assault on home ownership and private property rights. Jeff, while I find this article, can you remind us about the 10 planks of communism and what they have to say about home ownership and private property?
Hold on a second. I had to reach into the piles and piles of prep material over there because it was right on top. I could see it. I just had to grab it. Well, plank number 1 of the Communist Manifesto, abolition of private property in land and application of all rents of land to public purpose. So that's the very first thing that Marx puts, to get rid of private property. And in fact, they've already done that. Don't pay your property taxes. See who actually owns that piece of property. The guys with guns will come and kill you, or they will use force to remove you from the land.
And here's an example. What I'm going to share with you now is another reason, or how a means by which, beg your pardon, the federal government gets their hands on what happens in our little community. Now, go back to my many discussions on the American Community Survey and all the questions they ask you with regards to how you heat your home, how, you know, about schools in the area, about your medical needs, how many toilets you have, how many visitors you have. You can just Google American Community Survey. It comes up on a PDF. It's like 18 questions. They don't ask you directly about firearms, but they ask if you need assistance dressing yourself, I think how you're sleeping. And you know that certain questions are going to flag certain other issues. But this was an article here about from AmericanPolicy.org, and the growing assault on private property. Are single-family homes racist? This is how they get their programs through. We have to benefit minorities. We have to benefit women, children, families, and have these socialist policies. I'm not going to get into all the stuff in the article, but here are some issues here. Minneapolis, Minnesota, the city council is moving to remove zoning that protects single-family neighborhoods, instead planning to add apartment buildings in the mix. The mayor actually said such zoning was devised as the legal way to keep Black Americans and other minorities from moving into certain neighborhoods. Racist, social injustice are the accusations, are the charges behind this policy here. Chicago, Illinois. So-called affordable housing advocates have filed a federal complaint against the longtime tradition of allowing city aldermen veto power over most development proposals in their wards, charging that it promotes discrimination by keeping low-income minorities from moving into affluent white neighborhoods. I guess there's no such thing as affluent people of color. Who is the racist here, really, when you look at what they're proposing? Going back to the article, essentially, the complaint seeks to remove the alderman's ability to represent their own constituents. Baltimore, Maryland, the NAACP filed suit against the city, charging that Section 8 public housing causes ghettos because they are all put in the same areas of town. They won the suit, and now the city must spend millions of dollars to move such housing into more affluent neighborhoods. In addition, landlords, you're going to love this one, are no longer permitted to ask potential tenants if they can afford the rent on their properties. So, Jeff, I'm going to go to the Ferrari dealership. I'm going to buy a $1 million Ferrari, and they're out there. Is it unreasonable for them to ask? I am a woman. I'm affected. I should be a member of a protected class. Should they ask if I can afford this car, or should I, just because I'm a woman with 2 children, should I be able to just drive it off the lot? I hope it's an automatic. So here we go. Oregon. Speaker of the Oregon House of Representatives is drafting a legislation that would end single-family zoning in cities of 10,000 or more. She claims there is a housing shortage crisis and that economic and racial segregation are caused by zoning restrictions. First, how do they get, why are they doing this? Well, we have something called HUD, Housing and Urban Development. Jeff, can you find housing under Article 1, Section 8 for me?
I'll look.
Okay, I'll continue on. And again, if it's there, I apologize. We will edit this whole segment out, okay? We'll edit the whole thing out. So HUD, in order to enforce its social engineering policy, are demanding the following from communities that have applied for or taken. What is the means by which we have systematically dismantled this federal system? Grants and the federal judiciary. In fact, our good friend Rick Barrett, who has his degree in Homeland Security, said one of his instructors told the class, look, we have a new federalism where the feds force the states to capitulate and comply with their policies vis-a-vis grants. Stop taking the money, folks. You give it to them in the first place, it's laundered, and you get pennies on the dollar back, and you bend over for these guys. Stop it. So, HUD forces the community to complete an assessment of fair housing to identify all of the contributing factors to discrimination. These include a complete breakdown of race, income levels, religion, and national origin of every single person living there. They use this information to determine if the neighborhood meets a present balance determined by the HUD. I think it was some Fair Housing Act, too, that we were discussing a while back, too, that Obama's administration had. It's, again, social engineering. Why? Can you imagine, Jeff, if they put up Section 8 housing where I live? You've been where I live. A lot of these people don't have their own transportation. Oh, that's so unfair. You put them out where there are no bus services and there are no trains or public transportation. That's why people move to a lot of these communities, not to get away from people of color. They want some peace and quiet. When you have this condensed housing, you have the noise, you have the congestion, you have all the things that people that can afford to have a right to escape if they so desire. It has nothing to do with the color of the people in these communities. And if it does, so what? Second, the HUD demands a detailed plan showing how the community intends to eliminate contributing factors to this imbalance. Once the plan is prepared, the community is required to sign an agreement to take no actions that are materially inconsistent with its obligation to affirmatively further fair housing. Haven't we had the discussion over and over again that the purpose of the 10th Amendment and the enumerated powers were to ensure that policy decisions, local prosperity issues were to be decided outside of Washington, D.C.? Wasn't that the point of all this, Jeff, to form a more perfect union? To have a general government that essentially set up a common defense system and a free trade zone so the states could not set up tariffs against each other or infringe upon free trade. That was it. Not this social engineering of communities, because you know what happens? Then you get gentrification. I lived in a community in San Francisco. My parents purchased a home so I could walk to my community school. Some Black Road Messiahs in D.C. decided that because based on a study where Black kids looked at dolls that were different skin colors, we somehow needed to enhance their life experience and their self-esteem by putting these kids from their communities on a bus. That's going to be about 3 hours more that they're going to be away from their families, and ship them across town where they think they're more white people, and then take the white people out of these communities and ship them over on these buses, again, all the way across town for racial balance and harmony. We got neither. We ended up moving because we were racist? No. My parents didn't want me on a school bus for 3 hours a day. That's just common sense. That's them wanting their kid home more. There's nothing wrong with that. But you take this and make it a racist issue. Absolute insanity. Quickly, what have I done about this? I had a personal secession. I sold my home in California, bought a little place in the mountains in Utah. And I'm not so crazy. In fact, there's an article here in Outdoor Revival, 10 reasons to leave the city and go in the woods to build a cabin. Now, I didn't build a cabin here, but I set up a nice little homesteading style life of mine. There's a lot more I could do, but it's kind of hard to do when you're a lone wolf, but I do what I can here. And in the event of a collapse or any other kind of turmoil, I know I'm going to be safe here. But let's say you're not even doing this as a preparedness, as a prepper or doomsday option. You just want to get away from the insanity of the city. 10 reasons to go in the city and live and build a cabin. Jeff, you're doing this with some friends in Maine. Tell me about that experience.
Okay, I'll try to do it quickly here because we are running out of time quickly. I have friends that are homesteading up in Maine, and every year I go up and help them for a couple of weeks, 3 weeks of the year, and help them finish their house there. It's they're moving right along. They're getting really closed in now. I'm excited for them, and I'm hoping to buy some property there and start to do something similar myself up there.
Yeah, I really don't think real estate, unless you're a complete moron, can be a bad investment. And it's if you, whether or not you're buying your own property to do it or helping your friends, again, it's good for your health. You're getting out there, you're getting active. You can learn some building skills, teach somebody else some building skills as well. It's a lot cheaper than going to a resort. Again, it's a great investment in the long term as well. You get outside in the outdoors and get this homesteading experience. I absolutely love that possibility. Just getting away from the insanity and getting away also from the technology. Oh my gosh. So what a great way to do that. So here we are. We're kind of wrapping up this show here. What are the things that we want to take home from today's show? The Constitution really is a dead letter. If you really think that there is a solution to this, getting back to the Constitution is going to resolve these issues. Keep spinning your wheels, folks. The government doesn't seem to care about it. We put politicians up who not only aren't eligible for the presidency, nobody seems to care. Time and time again, we tolerate candidates constantly violating their campaign promises. All these endless wars, more gun control, and even when you try and pick them up in federal court and argue them, nobody even cares. Nobody even cares. Anyway, We got a lot of really fun stories to go over for the rest of the week, and we are out of time. I'm Suzanne Sherman. Jeff Johnson here with us today. Those of us here on Cerberus Radio Network, where we defend liberty and freedom from the flames of tyranny, want to thank you for listening. Have a great day.